Hello, and welcome back to the TikATeeMethod for the second video in our two-part video series on 16th note and rest variations. In week 14 and here in week 15, I am taking as many one-beat rhythmic motifs that I can that somehow, in one way or another, incorporate 16th note rhythms. Some may have 16th rests or 8th rests, some may have 8th notes or even dotted 8th notes, but all of these motifs will be one beat long in common time and somehow incorporate 16th notes. So we're going to add some new vocabulary to our musical sight words. We're going to review some of the vocabulary from week 14. We're going to do some exercises. It's going to be a blast. I hope you'll stick around for the whole video. If you are new to the channel, welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Ron Castingway. I'm a longtime educator, composer, author, conductor, clinician, and performer. And again, I'm so glad you're joining me for this video. So without further ado, we are going to dive in right now to some more 16th note and rest variations. Let's go do this. Okay, so here we are at week 14 and 15, the first time we encounter a two-week rhythmic concept in my book. It goes without saying that if you have not watched week 14's video, it's important that you go do that now before proceeding with today's video, week 15, because we're only going to expand upon what we learned in week 14. And as you can see from all of the blue and the green and the red ink on this page, we went over a lot. So go check that out right now before proceeding. I'm going to go over 9 new rhythmic motifs in today's video. Last week in week 14, we introduced 6 new rhythms, and that didn't even include the rhythms that were previously introduced in week 3, week 7, week 11, and week 12. So the first thing I want to do is erase all of the ink from this page and highlight the 9 rhythmic motifs we're going to go over today. All right, now we're all set to go. We're going to go over one pattern at a time. So let's start with pattern number 1 right here. As I explained in week 14, the Tik-A verbiage accommodates these 16th note patterns very, very logically. So we have Tik-A as our 4 16th notes, all occurring within one beat in common time. If I was to replace any one of these 4 16th notes with a rest, we would literally just leave out the applicable syllable. In this case right here for pattern number 1, we're leaving out the second 16th note and replacing it with a rest. So our pattern will now be tick, tick-a. So we have that ah that's going to be silenced now. So tick, rest, tick, ah. So in one beat, this is what it sounds like. Tick, tick-a, tick, tick-a, tick, tick-a. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, or if you're relating that to another rhythm, I want to show you this here. I'm just going to draw an arrow and draw this down at the bottom. And you can see that this is probably the way that you would actually see this rhythm in music. You would see a staccato 8th note, and then 2 16th notes. These two patterns are almost identical. And in this chapter, I actually go over which one you would rather see. Would you rather see pattern 1 musically notated, or would you rather see this staccato 8th note with 2 16th notes? Preferably, I prefer the staccato 8th note and 2 16th notes, but we're going over all of these 16th note patterns, and this one can exist. You can take a 16th rest and replace that second 16th note and have tick, tick-a, tick, tick-a, tick, tick-a, tick, tick-a, tick, tick-a, or T, tick-a, T, tick-a, T, tick-a, T, tick-a. Very, very similar patterns. So I hope that makes sense to you. Now let's move on to pattern number 2. The first thing I want to do here is erase this ink so that we can focus on pattern number 2. And in pattern number 2, this one right here, we're doing the same exact thing. We're taking tick-a, which is 4 16th notes that occur within one beat in common time, and replacing one of these 16th notes with a rest. And in this case, it's the third 16th note. So now we have tick-a, rest, ah. Tick-a, ah. It sounds like this. Tik-A, tick-a, Now, if that sounds familiar to you, check out the third pattern down in the fourth column, this one right here that I just circled. Even the verbiage is the same. Tik-A, Tik-A. So what's the difference between today's pattern and that pattern in column 4? Well, look at the 8th note versus the 16th note. In the 4th column, the 8th note is implying that that note in the middle is supposed to be held full value and longer. Tik-A, Tik-A, versus today's pattern where we have the rest happening here, and this note's a 16th note, which of course is shorter than an 8th note. Tik-A, Tik-A. But what if I added an articulation in that pattern in column 4? What if I put a staccato over that 8th note? Tik-A, Tik-A. Now that 8th note is short or separated. That is going to be very similar to today's pattern. And like I said about pattern number 1, I have a section in this chapter that actually asks you, which one would you prefer to see in music notation? Would you, in this case, prefer to see pattern number 2 from today's video, or that third pattern down in column 4? Preferably, I would like to see the one in column 4. It just makes more sense. That doesn't mean that the pattern in today's video, the Tik-A, rest, ah, doesn't exist. Can you have it? Of course you can. Tik-A, Tik-A. And you may see it in music, but I am willing to guess that you'd see the pattern in column 4 with a staccato 8th note much more frequently. So I hope that makes sense. And as you learn more and more about rhythms, you'll realize that some rhythms can actually be renotated in different ways, especially if you start incorporating articulations. Okay, let's move on to our next pattern, pattern number 3. Let me erase this ink here so that we can focus on pattern number 3, which is this one right here. And to no surprise, pattern number 3 is doing the same exact thing. We're taking our Tik-A pattern and replacing one of these 16th notes with a rest. In this case, it's the last one, so that last ah syllable. So what we're left with is Tik-A-Tik, 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 Tik-A-Tik. And we don't have that last 16th note. Now, can this one be renotated in any other way? Possibly. If I have 2 16th notes going to a very staccato 8th note, they could sound similar. Tik-A-tee, Tik-A-tee, Tik-A-tee. In this case, I have no preference. Both of them are pretty easy to see. Both of them sound similar. So you can see that there is a possible renotation of this one, but either one works interchangeably. All right, let's move to the second column and pattern number 4. I'm just going to erase this down here so we're really focused on what we need to focus on. And we're looking here at pattern number 4. Now, what we're doing here, we know we have Tik-A, Tik-A, but we're reversing it here. We have the inverse of what we're doing in column 1, where column 1 was the majority of the beat was 16th notes. There was 3 16th notes in every beat. Now we're going to have 3 16th rests in every beat here. So there's only going to be 1 16th note in every beat in each of the patterns in column number 2. So it's the inverse of column number 1. And the first one is the easiest. We're going to put rests here, here, and here. So all we have is tick, tick. All right, very, very simple. Tick, tick. Now, can that be renotated? Sure, if I had a staccato 8th note, T, T. But again, either one of these patterns is interchangeable. If I was to write it down here just so that you could see it, that's what it would look like if it was on the first beat in the measure. It would look like that. They're very, very similar. You'd see them either way. I guess if I had a preference, I would prefer the staccato 8th note over the single 16th note, just because it's a little easier to wrap my head around, but both of them are pretty interchangeable in this case. All right, let's move on to pattern number 5. First thing I want to do is erase the sync at the bottom so nothing is there to confuse us, and we're focused right here on pattern number 5. This one is really fun because it creates 16th note syncopation with just a single short note. So we have Tik-A, Tik-A. We're going to put 16th rests on the first one, the third one, and the fourth one. So we're only going to have that 16th note happening right after a 16th rest. It's going to sound like this. 2, 3, 4, ah. 2, 3, 4, ah. So again, it's got that 16th note syncopation, it's just a single note, and it's short. There's really no way to renotate this one either, so you would actually see it like this in the music. Contrary to that, pattern number 6 would seldomly be written this way. What's happening in pattern number 6 is we're putting rests on the first, second, and fourth 16th notes and only having this tick happen on the upbeat. So it sounds like this: 3, 4, tick, 3, 4, tick. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, it would most commonly be written like this. You would have an 8th rest and then a staccato 8th note. This is what you would see more commonly in music publications than an 8th rest and then a 16th note and then a 16th rest. That's a little bit more confusing to see. Now, it's included here because, is it possible? Absolutely. Will you see it from some publishers? Possibly. But more often than not, you're going to see an 8th rest and then a staccato 8th note. 3, 4, T. 3, 4, T. It's simply an upbeat. If you look at the math of pattern number 6, you can see that it's an 8th rest and then a 16th note. That 16th note is just coming in on an upbeat. So I would much rather, as a professional musician, see this one right down here at the bottom than try to figure out really quickly an 8th rest, then a 16th note, then a 16th rest. The less ink that we have there, the less confusing it is for musicians. So I hope that makes sense to you, and you can see that that 16th note just lands on an upbeat. All right, let's move on to pattern number 7. First thing I want to do here is just erase all this ink down here so that we can focus, of course, on this pattern right here, which creates a more fun 16th note syncopation. Let me show you how. So we have Tik-A, Tik-A. We're going to put 16th rests on Tik-A, Tik. And we're only going to have this last ah, and that's going to be the last 16th note in the beat. Here's how I would practice it. I would actually whisper tick-a, tick, and then say the ah out loud. Let me show you what I mean. I'll do a couple. 3, 4, tick-a, tick-a. And you can hear me saying tick, tick, and then the ah for that last 16th note. Now if I do the whispering in my head and just say the ah out loud, here's what it sounds like with a quarter rest in between. 3, 4, ah. Ah. So create some really cool 16th note syncopation. Now, there is a better way to notate this rhythm, and I'll show you. You could have a dotted 8th rest and then your flagged 16th note. For me, this one right here as a professional musician is much preferred because I know that a dotted 8th rest is equivalent to an 8th rest plus a 16th rest. And again, the less ink we have on the page, the more we can wrap our heads around rhythms more quickly, more efficiently. Now, will it be notated by publishers like it is here in pattern number 7? Absolutely, you'll see it that way. But I think you'll see it more frequently notated with that dotted 8th rest and then that 16th note. So just to recap what pattern number 7 sounds like, let's do 4 of them consecutively in a 4/4 measure. And what I'm going to do to stay true to the rhythm is I'll actually whisper the tick-a, tick for each beat and only say that last ah. Here's what it would sound like, and you can practice this with me. 3, 4, tick-a, 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 tick-a. That's kind of cool. Let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tick-a, 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 tick-a. All right, so that creates some really fun 16th note syncopation, having that last 16th note of the beat being spoken. But I will tell you, this one takes some practice. This one takes some time. All right, let's move on to pattern number 8. First thing I want to do here is erase all that green ink at the bottom so that we can focus on this pattern right here. And just like with our other patterns, the TikATee verbiage is going to accommodate very nicely into this pattern. So we have Tik-A, Tik-A, but instead of 3 16th rests, now we're just going to have 2 16th rests, which in this case actually end up being an 8th rest. They just combine them together right here. So those last 2 16th notes now are going to disappear and become rests, and we just have the first 2 16th notes. This is a really straightforward rhythm, and it really cannot be renotated any other way. Here's what it sounds like 4 times consecutively in a 4/4 measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tik-A, 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 Tik-A. And there it is. Very, very straightforward. 2/16 notes arriving on a downbeat followed by 2/16 rests, or in this case, 1/8 rest. All right, let's move on to pattern number 9. Now this one is the opposite per se of pattern number 8. Pattern number 8 came in on a downbeat. Pattern number 9 will come in on an upbeat. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So we have Tik-A, Tik-A. In pattern 8, we put our last 2/16 notes to rest. Well, in pattern number 9, we're going to take our first 2/16 notes and replace those with an 8th rest. So this tick right here is going to enter on an upbeat. Here's what it's going to sound like, pattern number 9, 4 times consecutively in a 4/4 measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tik-A, 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 Tik-A. So they're coming in on the upbeat. And just like with pattern number 8, there's really no way to renotate this. An 8th rest followed by 2/16 notes is the best way to notate this pattern. All right, we have now gone over all 9 of week 15's rhythmic patterns. If we take week 14's patterns plus week 15's patterns, there are 19 one-beat musical sight words that incorporate 16th note rhythms. Kinda cool. Now that we've gone over these in great detail, it's time to go do some more practice. Let's go find an exercise. I'm going to be going over exercises 15C and 15E in today's video. Now, some of the rhythmic motifs we just went over may or may not be in the exercises. We may just be reviewing some of week 14's rhythmic motifs. But either way, we're going to analyze these exercises and perform them in the same manner that we have in past videos. So let's get to analyzing exercise 15C right now. And right on beat 1 of measure 1, we have this Tik-A rhythm. Now, exercise 15C is actually focusing on this rhythm and really honing in on it to work on this rhythm. This is why it's so important that you actually go out and get my book so that you can have access to all 346 of these practice exercises. These videos are only intended to be supplemental resources to all of the exercises and materials and pro tips and diagrams that are included in my book. Now, getting back to this exercise, this rhythm, Tik-A, can also be written, if you recall, as 2/16 notes, a 16th rest, and then another 16th note. Tik-A. So, as I said previously, the way that it's written here in exercise 15C is the preferred way, but we want to make sure we're holding that middle 8th note full value. Tik-A, Tik-A. If I have this other rhythm with 2/16, a 16th rest, and then a last 16th, this 16th note's going to be short. Tik-A, Tik-A, Tik-A. And that's the difference between the rhythm on beat 1 and that second rhythm that can be renotated to kind of be similar to this rhythm on the first beat. And if you want to see what that looks like, it's 2/16 notes, a 16th rest, and then another 16th note. So it goes across here, and then you've got a 16th note here. That's what it would look like, and they're very similar. They even have the same words. We just want to hold out that 8th note in this one just a little bit longer to do it justice, okay? So I hope that makes sense. Let's move on. So in the rest of this measure, we just have rest. So on beat 1, let me erase this circle here. On beat 1, we've got Tik-A. On beats 2, 3, and 4, we have silence. We have rest, so we can look ahead. Then we have week 10's pattern, this T-Ta-T, which takes up 2 beats and creates 8th note syncopation. We can then draw an invisible bar line right here, and we have a half rest on beats 3 and 4. Now, in measure 3, we have 2 consecutive Tik-A patterns happening here on beat 1 and on beat 2. Again, 15C is honing in, it's focusing on that 1 beat 16th note pattern. We can draw the invisible bar line right here. Then beats 3 and 4 are these 2 quarter notes. Now let me erase this so that we can see measure 4. And we have T, T, T. Just a flag 8th note on beat 2, followed by an 8th rest. Then we've got beats 3 and 4, this half rest here, which is a great opportunity to look ahead to the next line to measure 5 so we can see what's coming up next. And what's coming up next is really fun. It's an entire measure of the Tik-A pattern. So on beats 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4, we have the same rhythmic pattern repeated. It's going to sound like this. 3, 4. Tik-A, a tik-a, a tik-a, a tik-a, ah. And then we move on to measure 5. Really fun measure. I love it when there's 16th note syncopation. So measure 5, we've got Tik-A, Tik-A, week 3. Then we have T, T, invisible bar line can go right here. We've got a quarter note on beat 3, quarter rest on beat 4. In measure 7, a quarter rest starts it off. Then we have our T-Ya rhythm from week 11, if you recall, on beat 2. Coming back to the rhythm for exercise 15C here on beat 3. Our invisible bar line is going to squeeze right between those two rhythms. Then we've got a quarter rest on beat 4. Moving into the last measure, measure 8, we have a reverse dotted rhythm. If you can recall that from week 12, we have the Ti-Ta. So this is going to take up 2 full beats. It's like taking week 6's rhythm, the dotted quarter note to the 8th note, and reversing it. The 8th note comes first, then the dotted quarter note. That's what week 12 was all about. We can draw the invisible bar line right here, and then we've got beats 3 right there in that quarter note, and we're going to hold that all the way out to beat 4, which is a quarter rest. So a fun exercise here. We've got some 16th note syncopation, we've got some 8th note syncopation, some really fun stuff. So now that we've analyzed it, let's go perform it together. I'm sticking with the Boss DB90 for our metronome today. I'm going to be at 74 beats per minute, or the quarter note equals 74. I'm going to be singing this exercise on a G3. Now, it's really important that you sing the exercises. Yes, you can speak them, that's fine, but we always want to be bringing musical relevance to our rhythmic exercises. So by singing it on a pitch, we're always being musical. Now, you're welcome to join me on a G3, an octave higher, an octave lower, or a different note altogether. But I hope you'll sing exercise 15C with me. Let's get the metronome started. All right, there it is. Here's our G3. I'm going to give us a count off, and then we'll perform the exercise. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and Tik-A. Ti-Ta, ti. Tik-A, Tik-A, ta, ta, ti, ti, ti. Tik-A, 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 ti, ti, ta. Ti-A, Tik-A, ti, ta, ta. All right. Stop the metronome, and there we have it, exercise 15C. We performed it. We need to know if we performed it correctly, so we go find the MP3 for exercise 15C. Let's go do that right now. Here we are at my website, where you can find all 363 of the MP3s that accompany my book. They are free to use whether or not you even buy the book, so use them for rhythmic dictation and other creative ways. All right, we are looking at exercise 15C. Now, as you can see on the page here, I've already got week 14's video up, and hopefully you've already watched that. I'll put week 15's video right next to week 14's, but week 14 and week 15 are all in the same bar in my website. So when you're navigating, you'll see that week 14 and week 15's MP3s are together. I've used the fast forward buttons here to get us to week 15C, and I'm going to press play in a second. But first, let's review your 3 options. Your first option is to just listen to the exercise and check for your accuracy that way. The second option is to sing along with the exercise. And the third option, if your instrument isn't the voice primarily, is to break out your instrument and to play your instrument along with the MP3, and you can check for your accuracy that way as well. Okay, so make your decision, because I am going to waste no more time. We're going to press play here on exercise 15C. One, 2, 3, 4. Tik-A, ti-ta, ti. Tik-A, Tik-A, ta, ta, ti, ti, ti. Tik-A, a Tik-A, a Tik-A, a Tik-A, a Tik-A, Tik-A, T, T, ta. T, a Tik-A, a T, ta, ta. And there you have it, exercise 15C. Now you'll notice on that Tik-A rhythm, I actually made the eighth note short, so it was a little bit like it was a staccato eighth note, and that's just to bring out and to emphasize the 16th note syncopation. Okay, so we listened to the MP3. If you didn't yet perform it on your instrument, now is the time that you need to go and do that before moving on. And before we move on to exercise 15E, the next one we're going to do for this video, here's a video of me performing in 4-part harmony on my alto sax, some fun harmonies to the rhythms in exercise 15C. I hope you enjoy. 1, 2, 3, 4. We can see right on beat 1 of measure 1 in exercise 15E what the rhythmic motif focus is going to be. It's going to be this pattern right here with that 16th note, then 2 16th rests, and then that last 16th note. Sounds like this. 3, 4, Tik-A, Tik-A. 2 in a row sounds like this. Tik-A, Tik-A. A really fun rhythm that incorporates short notes and 16th note syncopation towards the end of the beat. Really cool stuff. All right, so let's get to analyzing here. So we know that that's the pattern on beat 1, measure 1. On measure 1 in beats 2, 3, and 4, we've got rests, giving us that opportunity to look ahead, where we have a flagged 8th note on the downbeat of the second measure. Then on beat 2, we have an 8th rest, followed by a flagged 8th note on the upbeat of beat 2. Then we have beats 3 and 4, this half rest, letting us look ahead again. We have T, T, and then we have that Tik-A, 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 that cool rhythm there on beat 2, followed by T, T, and then that rhythm again. Now, as musicians, we can see that beats 1 and 2 are identical to beats 3 and 4. And if we can start recognizing these things right away, it's going to help us be better sight readers. So measure 3, T, T, Tik, A, T, T, Tik-A. Okay, and we can sight read that right away because we see that duplicate 2 beats happening. All right, the last measure on this line, we've got weak 6's rhythm, which is that dotted quarter note to that 8th note, and that takes up 2 beats. We've got an invisible bar line sneaking in right here. On beat 3, that quarter note, and on beat 4, a quarter rest, which is great because now we can look ahead to that next line to measure 5 to see what's coming up next. And what's coming up next is weak 11's pattern with that T-Ya, 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 that dotted 8th note to that 16th note, followed by a quarter note on beat 2, invisible bar line, and then the focused pattern for this exercise here on beat 3, and then beat 4, we have that quarter note. All right, moving on to measure 5, we've got a quarter note, followed by a quarter rest, invisible bar line. We've got a downbeat flagged 8th note here on beat 3, then on beat 4, an 8th rest with this upbeat flagged 8th note on the and of, or the upbeat of beat 4. In measure 7, we've got our pattern that's focused for exercise 15E here on beat 1, Tik-A, Tik-A. Really cool. Then we've got a quarter note, invisible bar line, quarter note on beat 3, TT on beat 4. Nice and easy finish off to that measure. The last measure, we have weak 10's pattern, which is that T-Ta-T, that 8th note syncopation. We know that takes up 2 beats. We can throw our invisible bar line right here before that half note on beats 3 and 4. I would tell my students to write -1 at the end of that measure so they hold that half note full value. Ta release. They're holding that full value and making it musical at all times. Okay, we've analyzed this exercise. It is now time to throw a metronome on, give us our G3 pitch, and sing this exercise. Let's go do it. All right, we're going to stick with 74 beats per minute, or the quarter note equals 74. And as I said, I'm going to stick with my G3. There it is. Let's clear this ink so we can see the exercise a little more clearly, and let's count this off and perform it together. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and Tik-A. T, 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 Tik-A, T, T, Tik-A, ta, T, ta, T-A, ta, Tik-A, ta, ta, T, T, Tik-A, ta, ta, T, 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 ta, T, ta. Okay. You heard how I held that last note full value. We got all of our Tik-A, Tik-A rhythms that are really focused and honed in on exercise 15E. And now we need to go check, though, did we do it right? Did we do it wrong? Did we make any mistakes? We need to check it against the MP3. So let's go find the MP3 for exercise 15E right now. All right, here we are back at my website. We are looking at exercise 15E. I've got it all queued up and ready to go. I know you know what your 3 options are, so make a decision. Without further ado, let's press play on exercise 15E. One, 2, 3, 4. Tik-A. T, 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 Tik-A, T, T, Tik-A, ta, T, ta, T-A, ta, Tik-A, ta, ta, T, T, Tik-A, ta, ta, T, 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 ta, T, ta. All right, there it is, exercise 15E. And if you have not yet performed exercise 15E on your instrument, especially if your instrument is not primarily the voice, now is the time to do that before you move on to the next exercise or the next rhythmic concept. And before we head to the outro, here is another fun performance of exercise 15E. I hope you like it. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, that concludes the second and final video in our 2-part video series on 16th note and rest variations. Now, between weeks 14 and week 15, I introduced 19 one-beat musical sight words that in one way or another incorporate 16th notes. Now, some of these patterns were actually introduced before week 14. For example, the 4 16th notes were introduced in week 3. We had patterns introduced in week 7, in week 11, and in week 12. That's why it's really important to go out and get my book so you can go through it in a sequential order. It's very scaffolded and intentional on when I introduce these different rhythmic concepts. And keep in mind that these videos are only hitting between 14 and 15, we only went through 4 exercises. So these are just intended to be resources to the book. That's why it's so important that you go out and get my book, Rhythmic Sight Reading, the TikATeeMethod. It's available at my website, roncastingway.com. It's also available on Amazon and at jwpepper.com. And don't forget to check out my store, Ron Castingway Music, on Amazon. There are a lot of great resources there for music professionals, music educators, and music students alike. And I hope you've already subscribed, but if you haven't subscribed to the channel, help me out and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button and that notification bell so you get the latest video. Thank you so much for joining me here for weeks 14 and week 15. In next week's video for week 16, we're finally introducing ties. I know you're excited. Don't pretend you're not. I'm looking forward to week 16. I hope you are too. I'll see you then.